Welcome back. Let's get a business update with William again. Hello again, William.
Hi,
so we're going to start off with a look at the latest developments on the Eurozone debt crisis. Greece, a deal was struck, another deal on Friday. Does it mean then that it's out of the woods?
Well, for the short term, in a way, yes, although effectively it did default on Friday. The debt has been in default now. Private investors have written off 75% of what they were owed, so it's almost at rock bottom. But there are still worries, despite the fact that a second bailout is expected to be signed off finally by Eurozone finance ministers at a meeting in Brussels on Monday today. There are still worries that a further bailout might be needed further down the line. Many analysts are saying that the second bailout wasn't enough, that there is a lack of growth in the Greek economy, so that even if things go as planned, it just won't be able to pay off its massive debts, which it still has despite that write-off by private investors on Friday. So still big worries about the Greek situation.
And another victim of the Eurozone debt crisis is Spain.
Yes, well, of course, earlier this year, and of course in the latter stages of 2011, we saw Italy and Spain really targeted on the bond markets, having to pay a lot of money to borrow new cash to keep their economies going. Spain is continuing to be a bit of a worry. Italy, under Mario Monti, is doing actually rather well. They've got a lot of reforms through just in his first 100 days, but Spain is causing concern. They said, of course, a week or so ago that it looks like they're not going to hit their deficit reduction targets. That's a source of concern. And of course, over the weekend, as we've seen those protests against reforms to change the labour market, the government hoping to shake things up and actually help the unemployment situation, which is particularly high among young people, around 50% in certain age brackets. Well, the protests have been against that because a lot of people think it's going to hurt employment chances rather than help them.
So what are Eurozone finance ministers going to do about all this?
Well, they're going to be talking about this on Monday evening, and one of the things that may be on the agenda is combining the Eurozone's bailout funds, which are currently in operation. Now, one of those was supposed to be temporary and is supposed to be being phased out, but because of the worries about countries such as Spain, some people are suggesting that both of these bailout funds be kept on, adding up to a combined 750 billion euros, which will act as a so-called firewall against any further problems in the Eurozone. However, this will require agreement from Germany and the German Parliament, and so far, of course, they've shown a lot of reluctance to throw any more money at this problem. They and German taxpayers feel that they've paid quite enough money already.
All right. Now, another challenge being faced by the EU is foreign opposition to its plans for a carbon tax on airlines. Last week, China blocked orders for new Airbus planes in response to this levy. And this Monday, European manufacturers are writing to politicians asking them to reconsider the divisive new tax.
Calling the new carbon tax into question less than 3 months after it was introduced. 6 European airlines have written to EU leaders saying the new levies to offset carbon emissions will jeopardise business and cost them billions of euros in lost revenues. They were joined by aircraft manufacturer Airbus in a letter that questioned the legitimacy of the tax. This comes after Beijing blocked orders of Airbus planes by 3 Chinese airlines in protest to the tax. A spokesman for Airbus said that the ETS issue started out as a discussion over environmental legislation, but it is turning into a trade conflict. The letter was addressed to David Cameron, Mariano Rajoy, Angela Merkel and François Fillon, the 4 heads of governments that helped fund Airbus. The Chinese freeze on purchases leaves 10 billion euros hanging in the balance for the company and endangers 2,000 jobs. The carbon tax on carriers should see them add a nominal sum to the price of flights, anything between 4 and 24 euros per return journey. But European countries, as well as China, Russia and the US, have argued that this tax contravenes international law. Nevertheless, Brussels is standing by the legislation ushered in on January 1st.
The emissions from the airlines are clearly going up. And this is a real issue. Every transport sector should take the cost for its emissions.
European carriers have urged authorities to delay the tax, arguing that reducing carbon emissions is a global concern and should not fall solely on the shoulders of the 27 member states.
Now we're going to stick with the aviation because there could be the industry could be seeing a deal quite soon.
Yeah, Volvo Aero is a producer in Sweden of engines and parts for fighter jets. They are potentially a target for GKN, a British engineering firm. That's according to the Sunday Times, a UK newspaper. The deal could be worth almost €1 billion. Apparently, that is on track at the moment. Volvo is planning to get out of the aero engine division. It supplies parts to civil and military aircraft. It wants to focus on its trucks and construction equipment divisions. And of course, there's also the car part, which you may have heard of, but that is a different part of the company, and the aero engines are very much a separate enterprise.
OK, because when I hear Volvo, I do think cars, I admit. Now, we're going to take a look at China. It's been seeing a bit of a slowdown recently.
Yes, concerning figures coming out of China at the moment. Of course, last week we saw they gave their lowest growth forecast since 2004, which caused a bit of a rattle to the markets. Now those has been followed up, those figures, by monthly deficit figures for February. They're the largest trade deficit in at least a decade. What that means is the difference between imports and exports, and it means that China is selling less to the world, while meanwhile it's buying in more commodities. So that's a sign that trade is slowing down for the Chinese, and could see a sharp slowdown in the Chinese economy.
And are the markets very worried about this?
Well, they do seem to be, just from their initial reaction this Monday. Let's take a look at how the markets have been closing over in Asia. The Nikkei has now closed down. It was bucking the trend earlier and staying in the green, but that has finished at 0.4% in the red. And it's a similar story on the other markets across the region there.
Now, this next story, I have to say, really caught my attention. The Swiss have decided to turn down extra holiday.
It's quite a surprising story, yeah. At the moment, they get around 4 weeks of holiday in Switzerland, is the standard. And they had a referendum on whether to increase that to 6 weeks of holiday each. And, well, I found it quite surprising they actually turned that down. They voted against it over the weekend. They did have warnings from employers and the government. They said that vacation in this extra 2 weeks would put labour costs up and put the economy at risk. And obviously voters took that on board and voted against having that extra bit of holiday.
They decided for the general good rather than their own individual.
Yes, I suppose it's quite
pleasure.
heartening in that sort of way. They also made a couple of other.
Swiss.
Well, yeah, they also made a couple of other decisions. No more than a fifth of each community's homes can now be sold as second homes. Again, a concern for Swiss voters, particularly in alpine regions where a lot of people just have second homes. People from France, from Italy, particularly, and also they've agreed to require all profits from lotteries and gambling go to culture and sports and environmental or social projects.
All right, thank you very much, Will, for that business update, and thank you for watching. Stuart Norval will have the latest headlines in just a couple of minutes. Don't go away.
In the United States, owning your own home is part of the American dream. But for many, the dream has become a nightmare. The country is gripped by its worst financial crisis since the 1930s. Every month, tens of thousands of homeowners are losing their houses to foreclosure. But people are fighting back. Our reporters went to Florida, the state that has been most severely affected, where one group of people helps these victims of the crisis to hold on to the American dream. Don't miss Reporters, tomorrow 1:40 p.m. Paris time on France 24.